Hey everyone, Mario again coming at you with another movie review, and today I'm reviewing a film that I actually just saw today for the first time ever in its entirety. I mean, a few years ago when I was hanging with Jeff and our friend Joey, who now lives in Oregon, by the way. We watched part of it one night, but we were doing too much stuff that was, too much stuff to sit down and watch it fully. Just walking by the TV and it's on, looking a little bit, but. It's a film I've been curious to watch for a while, and since they're doing another film in this series, I decided I'll go ahead and watch the film that started it all. It, of course, is the 2000 sci-fi thriller film co-written and directed by David, I'm going to see if I can pronounce his name correctly, I'm probably going to butcher this name, Twohy. Twohy? I think it's Twohy. Yeah, Twohy. David Twohy. I can't believe I can't believe I thought that was gonna be hard to pronounce. David Twohy. It of course is Pitch Black, and yes, this is my VHS of it. It's the special edition VHS. I haven't watched the making of stuff on it yet. I have a feeling it'll be interesting. Now this, as you can tell, was a film I enjoyed. Very entertaining, sci-fi action thriller. I can see why it has a 7.1 on IMDb. And a 76% with the audience on Rotten Tomatoes. After watching the film, though, I'm not really surprised at what the critics gave it. They gave it a 57% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it seems like some of them hate it. But here's the consensus. Despite an interesting premise and a star-making turn from Vin Diesel, Pitch Black is too derivative and formulaic to recommend to sci-fi or action fans. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. Granted, it does seem... It's a film that we've seen stories like this 1,000 times, but just because we've seen the story 1,000 times doesn't necessarily make the film bad. It's how it's executed, and I thought the film was executed well. David Twohy, I thought he did a good job directing the film, and I thought his writing in it was pretty good, although he wrote it with two other people, Ken Wheat and Jim Wheat. Now, David Twohy, this wasn't his first rodeo. I mean, before this he directed two movies. In '92 he directed a movie called Timescape, which I'm going to check to see real quick what that was about. That was a movie with Jeff Daniels. And then before this he directed a film called The Arrival, which was a film with Charlie Sheen. That's kind of funny. Then he did this film, then he did a film called Below, then he did the second Riddick film, The Chronicles of Riddick, then A Perfect Getaway, and then of course the new Riddick film. Now here's some things that I find interesting. As a writer, his writing credits are Critters 2: The Main Course, an early draft of Alien 3 from '89, Warlock. He also wrote Timescape. I'm going to check to see if he was the one who fully wrote the screenplay for this next one or if he was just one of the writers. Gotta wait for the page to load, but he was one of the writers behind the '93 adaptation of The Fugitive. And he's the one that came up with the story for it too. Then after that he did Terminal Velocity. He was one of the writers behind Waterworld. I'm checking to see how many people wrote that because I forget offhand. Oh, him and Peter Rader did that. Depends on who you ask. I thought that story actually was pretty good. The Arrival. Before Pitch Black he did G.I. Jane, The Imposter, and then of course the other films he directed. So he's one of those guys that can write and direct. And of course, this was one of the last films distributed by Polygram Filmed Entertainment, which they usually made films and then had other companies distribute them. Some of the most successful films were Fargo, Dead Man Walking, Notting Hill, Four Weddings and a Funeral. But other films they did were Clue, King of the Mountain, Drop Dead Fred, Candyman, California with a K, Terminal Velocity. Apparently they had a hand in Batman Forever, according to this list. Operation Dumbo Drop, Canadian Bacon, I Am Kazam, Bean, The Big Lebowski, The Doodlebads. And that's about it. That's about all the major ones. Now, in addition to Vin Diesel, the film stars Radha Mitchell, Cole Hauser, Keith David, Louis Fitzgerald, Claudia Black, and Rihanna Griffith, That's about all the big names. There's one also here, Simon Burke. Yeah, check, see if I recognize this guy real quick. I don't want to skip him over and then turn out I skipped over a name. Well, looks like I was probably right to skip this guy over, because this is the only film I really know him from. I'm trying to see which character he played in the film. Oh, he played Greg. Yeah, he wasn't bad for what he had to do. Now, I think I better go into the plot of the film. The plot of the film is it takes place in the distant future. How far in the future? At least this film, it doesn't say. I haven't watched the sequel yet at this time, so if you know how far in the future, don't go, it's this far in the future, this far in the future. I'll know when I get to the sequel. Now, we are aboard a transit ship called the Hunter Grotezner, and its crew and passengers are in cryostasis, and we start with a little narration by Riddick. It's an interesting narration. They pass through a comet tail while on autopilot, and debris from the comet ruptures the hull and kills some of the crew, including the captain. Oh, captain, my captain! Now, the remaining crew is awakened, and docking pilot Fry, played by Radha Mitchell, and her co-pilot Simon Burke, they awaken in time to land the ship on a nearby planet. Now, as they're flying, Fry wants to dump the passengers to save the ship and herself, which, if you think about it, is kind of a dick move. I mean, you're the acting captain now. You're supposed to protect your passengers. So I'm actually glad it got brought up later in the movie. Now, she's eventually prevented from it, and she manages to land the ship. And Owens dies in the process, but she manages to save a lot of the passengers, including a Muslim named Imam, Keith David's character, a young boy, or should I say boy, named Jack, a man named William J. Johns, who claims to be a cop, and of course they eventually find another passenger to be Richard B. Riddick, an escaped murderer who has been captured recently. Now, they explore the planet a little bit. They find that it has 3 suns. So if you know anything about gravity and all that, or anything about astrology or whatever science I think it is, I don't know if it would be astrology or something for something like this, but if you know anything about how the suns and all that work, with 3 suns you could kind of figure out without having to be told that the planet's going to be in constant daylight. This is one good lesson Dragon Ball Z taught me about something like that, because Namek, like this planet, also has 3 suns, constant daylight. But unlike Namek, this planet, as they find out, has a problem. That every 22 years, the planet undergoes a month-long eclipse. And it's about to start shortly. Now, I have to admit that it is kind of a coincidence that they land on the planet right at the time it's going to do that, but it's just something I've noticed, it's just a coincidence that they land there then, but that's the bad luck of the timing that they managed to be there. So it just adds to the danger of the film. And of course, as if being trapped on the planet with a murderer like Riddick wasn't bad enough in that, and also that the planet is in constant daylight up until an eclipse, they find out that there are vicious creatures on the planet that have an aversion to sunlight. They live under the ground most of the time, but when the eclipse happens, you can tell what's going to happen. And I just love how this is discovered, because first, that one character gets killed by him. Then, of course, another character almost gets killed by him. And then Riddick, I think, notices him a couple times because of his hearing and all that. And then, of course, they find the remains of a geology team that had gone to the planet, and that's how they slowly find out about the whole eclipse and that they were here 22 years ago when it last happened. And I guess you could tell what the rest of the plot is. They're going to have to try to figure out a way to get off the planet before the eclipse has started, or if it started without it going on too long. Now, if there's one question that my mind wonders about this planet is, how could life evolve on a planet like this that it's in constant daylight, except for 1 month every 22 years? Now, I could think that maybe some type of life underneath the ground could evolve, which that probably explains why these creatures evolved with an aversion to daylight or something. But it still makes me wonder a little bit. Like we see Bones early on, was maybe the planet was different in the distant past and the climate change or something. As I know the suns, it would probably always be there unless the sun's shifting the gravity was a more recent thing, and like one of the smaller suns got caught in the gravity of a larger one, and the gravity hasn't caused it to incinerate the planet yet or something. It's just some questions like that I wonder, but like with Dragon Ball Z with Namek and all that, I don't really question it too much because, you know, partially because plot. It's like, why is it like this? Plot makes it so. What? Make it so! You know, a little bit more Patrick Stewart there. Make it so! You know, you would love Patrick Stewart as your plot. Now, as I mentioned before, David Twohy's direction is pretty good. Now, there is CGI in the film, as you can kind of guess, but it didn't really bother me that much because, unlike nowadays, it wasn't really spammed. It was used for the creatures at appropriate times. And how Twohy used the camera actually did hide some of it. Like, when the creatures are out during the night or when they're underground, the CGI actually looks pretty good because of the shadow. And also when it shows them during the daytime, it's more the smaller ones. And also since they're moving a lot, you don't really get a good look at them, especially with how the cameras film it. So it's not really something that you can look at it now. Riddick's vision from the surgery, he got to be able to see well in the dark. That looks pretty cool, especially when it's a point of view shot. And of course we also see point of view shots from the creatures, so that adds to the technical aspect of the film. I hope that's not Riddick. Nope, it was not Riddick, thank goodness. Anyway, the movie was made for $23 million, which I could see about all that money up on the screen, or at least most of it. And it made $53 million, so it's about double the budget, so pretty good success for it. Enough to warrant at least a sequel, which I know the sequel barely broke even. At least initially, it's more of its cult following that's gotten a sequel, which gotten at the new sequel, which I could say on a side note, I really do hope that whole cult thing works for Dredd to get a sequel, but that's another day, another video. Now, acting wise, Vin Diesel, he's one of those guys that you know, slowly rose up in the movie business. I guess more than a lot of them did. If I remember correctly, where'd he go? I'm wondering why. I just clicked on his Wikipedia page and then it went automatically to astrologer. It's like, that's a weird leap. But anyway, probably one of the earliest films I remember him from, at least that I, you know, in retrospect, remember him from, is Saving Private Ryan. And of course, this is one that you hear that he's in there. He's like, he did that? He voiced the title character in The Iron Giant. Yeah. And of course, he did this film within a year. After that, he got The Fast and the Furious, and then after that, he got XXX. So his stock was rising, and he got the sequel to the sequel to Riddick, and then the animated film. Then he had that cameo in the other Fast and Furious film, and then all the other Fast and Furious films. He hasn't done that many films in the last 10 years, but he's one of those ones, because of the films he's done, he's always in the public eye. And I have to say, I like him. But he's one of those ones that, even though he's known more for being an action guy, at least in the couple films I've seen him in, which, other than this, the other one that comes to mind that I've seen all the way through is The Pacifier, which I could say I actually did have fun with that film last time I saw it, but who knows, maybe time will change it. But in this, and in Saving Private Ryan, he does flex acting muscle, a little bit more here, I'll say, because he's a star here, maybe because he has more screen time. But his acting interpretation of the character is believable. I mean, if I were reading this in a novel, how he did Riddick is more or less how I'd probably picture him. Kind of a cold bastard that would probably warm up to you eventually, but because of the fact he has that drive to kill, he probably would avoid it. Radha Mitchell as the character of Fry. She was semi-likable. The reason I say that is because at first you kind of don't like her because of the fact she wants to dump the freaking passengers, but you understand why. She's trying to make sure that they don't crash, but then she manages to save everyone's life, so you do kind of forgive her, especially as the film goes on. She's trying to save everyone, and then of course in the end when she tells Riddick, I'll die for them, you more forgive her for that, which I'm not going to go any more than that, but you do. And Mitchell's performance as a character I thought was believable and fitted. Nothing, Academy Award winning, but then again, but very believable. Other films she's been in, I haven't seen any of the stuff she did before this film, but after this film, she was in Phone Booth, Man on Fire, Finding Neverland, Mozart and the Whale. She played Rose de Silva in Silent Hill, which I go check to see real quick which character that was. Okay, our main character. I thought she did a good job in that. She was in Surrogates. She had a cameo in Silent Hill Revelation last year, and she was also in the remake of The Crazies. And this year, she was in Olympus Has Fallen as Leia Banning. I believe that was... wasn't that... yeah, that was Gerard Butler's wife in the movie. On screen, she and Gerard Butler made a good couple. She's also done some TV work, a couple episodes of some shows. She's a nice, good actress. Cole Hauser as William J. Johns, which you guys see which character that was again. Oh yeah, the cop. That's all I'm going to say about it because it's a plot point I do not want to spoil. But I thought from how his character is, he did a good job. Films he's done other stuff, like he was in Good Will Hunting. Before this film, obviously. After this film, he was in Heart's War, White Oleander. He was in Too Fast, Too Furious. A little ironic name. Paparazzi, which I remember the trailer for that film. The Stone Angels, The Breakup. And he was also in Olympus Has Fallen. But he was also in A Good Day to Die Hard. He played Mike Collins. Offhand, I forget which character that was. And he's also done some TV work, like he was in a few episodes of VR and Chase. For how his character was, he fit it. He seems more, though, he's more like an actor that plays lower characters, but here he's kind of a semi-important character in the grand scheme of things, especially his little relationship with Riddick, which I thought was interesting. Which I don't really want to go fully into it because I don't want to spoil it, but it's an interesting relationship, although it does keep you guessing as he talks to Fry, and then Riddick talks to Fry. It's like, okay, which one is telling the truth? We know Riddick is a murderer. He's admitted it himself, so he's not like he's trying to hide that. But it makes you wonder, who should we believe, the murderer or the cop? I guess you could probably guess I believe the murderer. Okay, Keith David as Imam. He did a very great job, and Keith David is a guy who has one of those very distinctive voices that the moment you hear it, you're like, oh, I know who that is. And it's because of that voice that he's well known for his voiceover career. He voiced, he voiced Goliath on the Disney series Gargoyles, which is what I know him from. He was the voice of Spawn on the HBO show. Did some voice work in Halo 2 and 3. He was in the Saint Rose games. He was Sergeant Foley in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. He played, if I'm guessing right, that's the Shadow Man in Princess and the Frog. And he did Chaos in the two Dissidia games. And of course, his voiceovers for the United States Navy commercials. And he was the replacement narrator for City Confidentials. That's his voiceover career. Films, he was in Platoon, Roadhouse, They Live, The Thing. And I'm trying to remember, in They Live, isn't he the one that fights Roddy Piper over the sunglasses? Let's see. Dead Presidents, The Quick and the Dead, A Volcano, Armageddon, There's Something About Mary, Requiem for a Dream, Final Fantasy The Spirits Within, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Transporter 2, and more recently, a movie called Freebirds, Death at a Funeral. That's about it with movies. Oh, he was in an episode of Young Justice. Interesting. You did a very good job as the character. I mean, the character is very religious. It's one of those Muslim characters that, always has to do the praying, which, of course, with how the last act goes, he kind of has to defer it, which I actually did like as a character. He brought it up. And I do like one of the scenes he shares with Riddick where they're talking about religion. It was interesting. But he's not like one of those hardcore Muslims that it interferes with everything. Like, he'll mention something, but it's not like he'll, like, bash you if you don't believe it. So it's a tolerant religious guy. I like religious people like that. Claudia Black. She did a good job as Sharon. She's more, if I remember right, she's one of the more she's a minor female character, so not in the film that much. After the she'll need a handful of scenes, or at least where she's talking, up until the eclipse. And it looks like she's more of a TV actress, because most of what I'm seeing on here looks like TV stuff. Farscape, Xena Warrior Princess. She was in Amazon. She was in Queen of the Damned as Pandora. Stargate SG-1, NCIS, 90210. She's also done video game work. Diablo 3, The Amazing Spider-Man game, Justice League Doom. She voiced Cheetah. Gears of War 3, Dragon Age Origins. Oh, she voiced Artemis in God of War 1. Cool. And then, of course, Rihanna Griffith is the character of Jack, or Jackie as we'll call her later. I thought she did an interesting job, especially since a character like this is kind of hard to pull off. A character you think is one gender, but that you find out is another gender. I actually already knew about this because of Cinema Sins, but I actually forgot about it until the movie was playing. I'm like, oh yeah, it's a female character, I forgot. It was an interesting plot twist. I actually thought it was interesting how they revealed it. Riddick telling them all just because he smelled it. Hey, he has a good nose. And like I said, kind of a hard role to pull off. Easier for a younger actress to pull off because of the voice not changing. Because, you know, some younger men, because some boys can actually have high-pitched voices, so a girl could pass for them easily. And that's about all with the actors, and we're going to do the rest of them. They did a good job for what the character was. The special effects I've already talked about. I thought they were good. I actually did like it when they threw in practical effects every once in a while, like when some creatures got ripped to shreds, like you see practical body parts flying. Anyway, my rating for Pitch Black is a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Very fun sci-fi thriller. And if you haven't seen the film, I recommend you go see it, especially if you saw the trailer for Riddick and want to go see it.